We are Southeastern 16. I'm Chase Robinson. That's Chris Lee. Today, we're going to talk three biggest questions for the Alabama Crimson Tide as they head into their Week 1 game against Western Kentucky. That will be Saturday night, 6 p.m. on ESPN. Alabama big favorites in this game, of course, but we'll talk three big questions for the Tide right after we talk Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, you can go to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Chris, when it comes to Alabama this year, I think one big question for me is the offensive line. That is a position that I feel like in recent history, when you talk Alabama football, that's what a lot of folks have wanted to talk about is the offensive line. We think back last year, they had some struggles. You think back even to the most recent game Alabama played, that was against Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and there was issues there, snapping the ball. There was other issues blocking, providing space. And so I think that was kind of a focus this year with the new coaching staff is let's get some guys in here who can block up front and lead this offense. And I think they've done a good job. I mean, Parker Brailsford at center, I'm interested to see him. He's the Washington transfer. A lot of talk around him in the offseason. You got Tyler Booker on that left side at guard. And I think he's an All-American guy. I think he's going to be great. Kayden Proctor is another guy who I'm interested in seeing this year. He transferred out after Nick Saban left. He went to Iowa for a couple of weeks. He ended up back in Tuscaloosa, transferring back to Alabama. He's a strong tackle. I'm interested to see how he fits in. And then the right side, I think, is where the questions are. There's just not a lot of starts on the right side of the offensive line, and I'm interested to see who plays where and how that fits together. But I think a big question for me is just the solidarity of the offensive line this year.
Yeah, Chase, that's a great starting point to talk about this team. A source I've got that's pretty plugged in down there felt like they were pretty confident about the offensive line, felt like it could be as good as just about anybody's. You mentioned center where they had snapping issues a year ago. Parker Brailsford, the Washington transfer, who you mentioned, was second-team All-Pac-12 last year. Pro Football Focus rated him as the best center in the country, so you would think they were in good shape there. The left side, they're on fantastic shape with Tyler Booker and Kayden Proctor at left guard and left tackle, respectively. The right side of the line, as you said, I think that's where the questions are, but you got Elijah Pritchett at right tackle, who was a top 35 recruit a couple of years ago. So I think, where they lack in experience, the recruiting rankings said they've made up for it in talent. And of course, they've got the head coach who coached the best offensive line in the country last year, I believe. Yep. So I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism here, but we need to see how that plays out.
Yes, we do. So, Chris, what's a big question for you for Alabama?
Well, we had our fantasy draft yesterday, and with your, I think, second or third pick of the whole draft, you took Justice Haynes. And I said at the time, I think that is a boom or bust pick for your team because there's a lot of tailbacks in this league that are pretty good. And you picking him over a lot of other guys at that spot, I thought was a statement about the kind of season you think he'll have. I want to see what it looks like now. I don't know that Western Kentucky is the best litmus test for that. This is a program that is usually far ahead on offense of where it is on defense. But hey, if Justice Haynes rips off a dozen carries for 150 yards, maybe that's a sign that he's ready to be that elite tailback that they have not really had in a couple of years, that they've gone more committee approach the last 2 years or so.
Yeah, and I was just so impressed with him in the Michigan game. Like, I think that was his coming out game in the Rose Bowl. And there's other guys in that running back room. He's not going to get all the touches, but I think he's going to get a lot. And I think he's primed to have a good season. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do for Alabama. I think it's crucial they get the run game going early, and I think they do have a very strong running back room.
Yeah, I think if Justice Haynes steps up and is a 1,000-yard rusher for them, you have to up your forecast for Alabama just a little bit. I think that the ceiling for this team is pretty high, but I think for this team to get there, there's a decent chance that Justice Haynes needs to be a big part of it. Not that Jam Miller and some other guys can't do the job, but I think he is perceived is the highest upside back on the
Yeah.
roster, and you'd like to see him get the most out of what he can bring.
Yeah, that is for sure. I think the third biggest question for me when you look at Alabama heading into week one is who's going to step up in the secondary on this defense. I think the offense is in really good shape for Alabama, but I feel like there's some things to figure out on defense, and it starts with who kind of steps up in the secondary. And I think they're good along the defensive front, and of course they have Malachi Moore at safety, who is a All-American guy. You got Keon Sabb transferring in from Michigan. And then you got some younger guys, some high school guys in there. You did get a transfer from USC, transfer from Wake Forest, and then you have a lot of guys back as well. Devontae Smith, not the receiver that played for Alabama a few years ago. This is a linebacker, Devontae Smith, on the Crimson Tide team. He's battled some injury, and so I think he's going to be back this year in that Husky position that Kane Womack brings on this defense. But I'm just interested who are going to be some of these guys who are the names on the Alabama defense besides Malachi Moore. Because you think back, you've had a Will Anderson, you've had a Dallas Turner, kind of those anchors of the defense, those big names. And I feel like there needs to be some guys to step up and make a name for themselves on this Alabama defense.
Yeah, I do too. I feel like Alabama's always got good, young, talented defensive backs, and Nick Saban was never averse to throwing a freshman corner out there, which sometimes can be a recipe for disaster, but they usually made it work because that guy was either good enough and or the surrounding talent in the pass rush. Now, this year they took an interesting approach. They brought in established corners in Damani Jackson and Deshaun Jones from Southern Cal and Wake Forest, respectively, but then they've got I guess 4 freshmen here that you could see, maybe 5 that would play a part. Some of those of the redshirt variety, some of those of the true freshman variety. I'm talking Xavier Brown, Xavier Mincy, Jalen Mbake, I guess is how you pronounce it. Those were all stud recruits. Where do they go with the playing time? Do the freshmen seize time early and make the most of it, or do they have to rely more on those transfers who were maybe good players at their previous stops, but not the All-American type corners that you're used to seeing at Alabama?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've just kind of watching some of these guys, these high school guys, either play in high school or watch them on tape. I saw Jalen Mbakwe play in person. He is outstanding. He's a guy I feel like that could make a statement in his freshman year at Alabama in the secondary. There's a lot of unknowns, I feel like, and it'll be interesting to see Saturday night against Western Kentucky who is the guys who step up and not only in this game, because again it'll be, I feel like, hard to gauge in this Western Kentucky game, but in a couple of weeks next week against South Florida, and then the following week at Wisconsin, I feel like is when we'll learn a lot about this team. So those are our 3 biggest questions for Alabama heading into week 1. We'll have you covered with the Tide and the rest of the SEC here on Southeastern 16. So subscribe to our channel, like this video, share with your friends, and if you're interested in sponsoring our content here on Southeastern 16, would love to have those conversations with you. Caroline.smith at Southeastern 14 is the email address you can send your inquiry to, and again, we can start those conversations. But we are Southeastern 16. I'm Chase Robinson. That's Chris Lee, and we're brought to you by Bet Online.